Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, having to adjust the mic because Crystal's here is very tall. Alright. Hi, everyone. I'm Seb.
Hello, I'm Mary.
And I'm Callie. And we're going to chat to you guys about some music today. This is pretty Doctor Who music. We are having some technical difficulties. So we have audio, but no video. So you're treated until this, with this lovely blue screen until it turns out and shuts off.
Sorry about that. Well, gather around to the laptop here.
But yeah, we're going to get started.
All right. Well, just to sort of open things up, what we're going to be talking about is primarily the scoring and looking at particularly companion themes. I know any of you that have been to our panels in the past know that we've sort of done the Doctor's theme, Gallifrey's theme before. So today we decided to focus on those companion themes. And we're talking about sort of how they affect character development, as well as sort of communicating emotional signals to the audience, that sort of thing. So just for sort of a broad approach to things, I just want to throw out some terms for you guys that we're going to be using, including primarily the notion of the diegesis. I don't know if any of you guys have encountered. Diegesis is something that comes up in film studies quite often. But essentially, the diegesis is the world of the narrative. So in film or in television, it's what the characters are experiencing, as opposed to non-diegesis or non-diegetic, being the adjective form. Is the things that happen outside of it. So a score, for instance, is an example of non-diegetic because it's not happening within the world. A good rule of thumb is, can the characters hear it? If they cannot, then that's your non-diegesis. So some interesting examples you may have seen before, like sometimes it's kind of a cool trend where like the character will turn on the radio and you can hear the character listening to the radio, obviously, right? So that starts off as diegetic. And then as they like maybe drive away, and then you get sort of a wider shot, and the sound becomes a part of the greater concept of the film, and then it becomes non-diegetic as more of a soundtrack than the character's radio, if that sort of makes sense. I'm getting some nods, but thank you for nodding. It's really helpful when you guys sort of respond. I've done some before where people just stare, and I was like, hello? Thank you for nodding, it's really helpful. So yeah, that's sort of, did I miss anything?
No, I think it's pretty good as long as you've got a general understanding of that. Thumbs up, good.
Good.
All right. And feel free to just flag us down, just like jump up and down. If you have any questions, raise your hand with your arms. Try to answer as best we can. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started with, I guess, Rose.
Let's start with Rose.
So we're gonna listen to a bit of her theme. It's a good one. Alright, so a really big theme with a lot of the companions' themes, is that they have a tendency to signal the character's humanity and their connection back to Earth and their families to each other and just really their lives. And so the first time we actually hear Rose's theme is in the episode The End of the World. After Rose and the Doctor sort of get in a fight, after the Doctor explains the TARDIS's telepathic network, and he fiddles with her phone, and she calls Jackie, she calls her mom. And that conversation is the first time we actually hear her theme in the entire series. Sorry.
So that occurrence is also quite an important connecting point as well, because of the way that it signals, like Seth said, it signals that sort of connection to humanity, obviously. And as we all know, sort of the companion's general role throughout the narrative is often that bringing the sort of otherworldly creature of the Doctor into our hearts and into our homes as a part of humanity. I think a lot of the importance of the way that that theme shows up around her calling home is the way that instead of her theme becoming an isolating factor and making her outside of the world of humanity by traveling with the Doctor, what happens is that she brings the Doctor in. She brings the Doctor to humanity and invites him into her family. Potentially.
Yeah, it is. Well, especially because the events of these episodes are very, very soon after the end of the Time War, and he's regeneration, so he's sort of cut himself off from the world. So Rose sort of brings him back, and it's like, hey, look at how great the world can be again, you know?
It's a very hopeful theme.
Yeah. And just like that, you know, it shows up again in the parting of the waves, where they're sitting on the floor, they're building the Delta Wave, and the Doctor says, you know, you could ask for me to take you home, and it's like, it never even occurred to you, did it? And so that's Rose really working towards not only saving humanity, but doing something good and saving the entire universe and wanting to be there to help him. So he's not alone killing all these dogs, like he was last time.
Sure, yeah. There's some interesting stuff that comes up around Mickey, which we may also touch on when we get to Rory as well. Kind of an interesting situation in analyzing the music here is the fact that Mickey and Rory don't actually have their own, they don't actually have their own themes. Their themes are connected intimately with their girlfriends. But it creates an interesting situation because there's a certain, I think, this may be up for discussion, but perhaps a loss of agency there in not having their own personal theme. Obviously, Rory and Mickey are both extremely important characters and very pivotal in their own right, but I think particularly with Mickey, which again, maybe up for debate, what he does tend to represent, I think, throughout the narrative is more a catalyst for Rose's own character development, and the way that he can sort of represent her, maybe, tiredness, that's a terrible word.
He's the tin dog.
He's the tin dog, yeah. Poor man. We love you, Mickey. But you don't have your own theme, and you know, from a musical standpoint, you lose points. You lose points without a personal theme.
Mickey does actually borrow Rose's theme at one point. So in Age of Steel, after everything's sort of taken care of in London, when Mickey decides to stay in the parallel universe, during that whole conversation, you actually hear Rose's theme play. And so that's sort of Mickey borrowing Rose's theme as sort of this initiative for him to go out and do some good in this world. Because like his gran is still alive in that world, you know. He has things to like work for and live for and move towards, unlike he does in like our universe.
So perhaps the presence of Rose's theme in that moment could be indicative of maybe the reversal of that catalyzing effect that I was talking about earlier, where instead of him catalyzing Rose's relationship with the Doctor, Rose has catalyzed his choices to kind of become a more ambitious person. So he sort of adopts the ambition in Rose's theme and then gets to experience that himself on his own terms. Potentially a reconciling of Mickey's lack of theme there, but up for debate, as I said.
And then, our last little bit about Rose here, you would actually hear some variations on her theme. So, in musical terms, a variation is like, we just heard Rose's theme, right? And so, if you take it and sort of mix stuff around and change some notes and, fill with time signatures or the key or something, that's a variation. So it's essentially the same piece of music, just in a different form. And so a couple of times, you hear a variation on Rose's theme in the score, especially in Parting the Ways and Army of Ghosts. The Parting the Ways, you hear it after 9 sends Rose back in the TARDIS, and she's sitting there talking with Jackie about how she wants to go back and help everything. Army of Ghosts, sorry, notes, is when they're sitting on the patio, Rose and Jackie are sitting out on the balcony, talking about how she and her Pete are getting divorced in this parallel universe. And so that's sort of, just because it's almost her theme, but it's not quite, it sort of sends up a red flag and sort of makes the viewer a little uncomfortable that something's not quite right. It's not quite what it should be. Question?
Is that a variation on the theme?
It's not actually on the soundtrack. And we don't have video. So
I would love to take our word for it.
I would absolutely love to let you hear it, but
But go watch an episode, see if you notice that the theme is just a little bit off. Bring it back to us. Tomorrow, we'll reconvene.
There's actually homework.
5,000 words, no space. Other Rose questions. Wait, questions.
Is that 12 point times New Roman?
Yes, MLA formatting, please.
I was just gonna say, because Rose's theme comes back in season 4, when we start seeing her, when she's doing her crossover, and then of course the moment when she finally gets back with the 10th Doctor and they're running. I'm pretty sure that's Rose's theme. And then it gets shot, all that. But,
for those of you who didn't hear, she's mentioning about how Rose's theme comes back in the 4th series.
Yeah, so Rose's theme, it does come back. So it comes back in the very first shot where she teleports in on the street with her big gun. And then when she and Ted are running towards each other in the street. And then after that, it's actually a piece called Doomsday that really takes over is what plays through a lot of their interactions in the whole end scene of the beach. And her theme actually does return once more when he says, and I suppose if there's one more thing. Do you guys want to hear a little bit of Doomsday?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that mostly takes over for Rose's theme in the middle of series 4.
Could you argue that Doomsday and Rose's Doomsday could also be a
variation of Rose's theme a little bit?
A little bit, yeah. The instrumentation is very, very similar, if not almost exactly the same.
It's just the melody, the
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so they're very, very much intertwined. Yeah. Ooh, back over there. Yeah.
I just kind of wanted to point out how there's the string instrument in Rose's theme kind of underlying, and then in Doomsday you have the strings and the piano, but they're never actually together except for the bass. Except for like this 2-second mark.
Yeah.
I just find that really interesting.
Yeah, that can sort of reinforce how she's, been gone for so long, just trying to reconnect.
Might also be related to the whole idea of two things that should be together being separated.
Oh yeah, we're gonna move on a little bit and talk about Martha. Okay, so we're gonna listen to a little bit of Martha's theme here. So Martha's theme, interestingly, usually we hear Candace's themes not in the first episode, maybe the Doctor, but the episode after it. And Martha, we actually hear her theme pretty much immediately when she first sees the Doctor in the street. He sort of whips off his tie. It's like that. Because in the Doctor's timeline coming back, she's already traveled with him. She's already been to the moon and back, and everything. So she's already sort of started her journey with the Doctor, which is why we hear it so soon in that relationship.
Which also sort of reinforces a sort of familiarity in that moment, because it's like a weird little moment, especially because obviously there's that weird sort of dramatic irony where we're not sure why he just ran up to her and whipped his smile, and then we'll find out later what he's doing as he, woo, time travel. But like, it kind of makes that moment a little bit more comfortable by going, oh, wait a minute, there's a familiarity here, because the theme already exists, so there's a sensation of an established relationship already existing, despite it just being that moment.
And then it shows up, and I want to say it's the sound of drums, the end of series 3, one of the master mark at the end, where Martha calls Francine, she calls her mom. Even though the Doctor's warned her it was trapped by Harold Saxon, they're like, gonna get caught, she shouldn't call them. But Martha still persists. She still calls her family to try to save them from what's going to happen. That sort of echoes back to Rose's phone call with Jackie, which we hear. So it's not quite a reconnection with her family, because Martha hasn't really lost touch, but it's really more of a rescue. She wants to keep her family how it is. She doesn't want anything to happen to them. Question?
I think it's, as you just said, it's kind of a connection with Rose and her calling back to her mother. It has a piano and strings too, as it's walked in the last 2 weeks. I think that makes a parallel too. The Doctor still thinking of Rose, and really is. In some cases, I think Martha even feels like a second place to Rose sometimes, even though later she develops her own arc, and it's like, okay, she's totally different. But I think it's a connection again.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'd like to bring that up too. For those of you who couldn't hear, she was sort of mentioning Martha's relation sort of to Rose, and kind of feeling like she's sort of the maybe runner-up or maybe lesser than Rose. It's kind of a difficult situation there. But I would also argue that I think what's really key about this moment for Martha, as compared to Rose, is where Rose is she's happy to be out in space and being out there inviting the Doctor home, as we said before. Whereas in Martha's case, she's a lot more invested in her like earthly humanity life. I mean, she's becoming a doctor. She's really concerned for her whole family unit, and so I think some of the ties to her family in that attempt at rescue actually almost gives Martha more agency than Rose had in hers, because Martha is sort of actively trying to get back to her family, where, as I know you wanted to sort of get into, the doctor is more focused on Martha than perhaps, well, Martha is more focused on her own family. Thank you. Good. Did you have a question over there? It's all good. Right on.
Now that we're talking about Martha and Rose a little bit, in the episode of Black Turn, I do forget, does Rose's theme come back? Because you do see Rose in Black Turn.
Yeah, it does for a little bit. It's not much, because the episode is so centered around Donna, and what Donna has to do to save everyone. Rose's theme mostly in series 4 functions as a, hey, this is Rose. This is the Rose you know, it's not some other Rose from another universe or something.
It also sort of creates that kind of triumphant familiarity. You know what I mean? That feeling of like, oh my gosh, Rose is back! Like, the music itself is, I think, a really pivotal part of that, because as you said, it confirms for us that yes, that is totally who you think it is, and it's not like a shape-shifting monster or something. It totally could be.
Not sign on.
Oh, yeah, thank you, sorry.
Yeah.
With each character, each companion's themes, did Murray know kind of what was going to happen with the characters before? Because Martha's theme seems to have some of that longing for the love of the Doctor she never gets. Did he know prior what was going to happen with the characters?
I'm not entirely sure how the writing process went, but stuff, like I know they planned out big story arcs, before writing and stuff. So there's a very, very good chance that he did actually know a bit of what was going to happen, at least the general, like, season-long story arc. Maybe not particulars, but that's just my guess, just from what I know about the writing process.
Yeah, if anybody knows Marigold, like, give them a call
Yeah.
for us. We'll get back to you on that one.
Yeah.
You had a question for her, okay.
So what struck me when I first watched series 3, what struck me about Martha's theme was how close it was to the Doctor's theme, with the soft vocals and that kind of lilty way of expressing itself. So do you think that there's some connection there?
Yeah, I mean, there's a basic, in all of the themes, in most of the companion themes, there's an exception or two. There's a vocal part, and it's usually backed, Rose is backed mostly by a piano, and Martha's, the second companion, she gets the full orchestra, so that does sort of tie her closer to the Doctor's theme, which might have something to do with how quickly they started off venturing together, sort of reflects.
Can I ask a question? Because you might have to remind me. But to what degree does the Gallifrey theme tie into these musical similarities? Because as you pointed out, Gridlock is one of those sort of first scenes where somebody really starts to pry with him about what happened to Gallifrey. And so you make an interesting point there. So I was just wondering, does the Gallifrey, because that's the one that comes up when she's asking about Gallifrey? Or is it
It's Martha's
It's Martha's theme when she's asking about Gallifrey.
So actually, the first time you hear that, it's Martha's scene when the Doctor's like, where do you want to go? And she's like, what planet do you want to go? She's like, how about yours? It's Martha's theme. It's not Gallifrey. It's not the Doctor's theme. It's Martha's theme. But then later, at the end of the episode, when Martha sits down and refuses to leave until the Doctor tells her, then it's, which I don't have my notes in front of me, but I do want to say it is Gallifrey. This is Gallifrey. So there is that connection there, especially because Martha's really the first one to pry, about Gallifrey, like, where are you from? What is this? What happened? It's an interesting point to bring up.
Right. episode lets me handle this part. It's fine. So I find Donna's theme absolutely fascinating, the way that it sort of reflects her character. Because Donna, I think, she's a much more complicated character than she likes to let on. And I think a lot of her character development is spent building a facade in front of herself to hide a lot of pain that she feels in her life. And so I think her theme is a really interesting reflection of that, because as you guys heard, it's sort of poppy and fun, and it's the, oh, Donna, she's the sassy one kind of theme, you know. But as we all know, like, Donna's sass, you know, it only goes so far. Ultimately, when you scratch below the surface, you find that it's really more of a defense mechanism for her. And so I think that the way that the music reflects that, it becomes this extension of that facade for her. And something that's really interesting that Seb was bringing up in the notes about where the themes occur throughout the season is that her theme shows up more than any other companion's theme, just for, you know, mass of the sounds happening over the course of the episode. And as a result of that, it almost sort of loses its impact slightly, and it starts to blend in with the rest of the music in the episode. That you wouldn't necessarily put it on and go, oh, is that just Donna, or is that the fun music for a bunch of people in the city walking around and everyone around her? And so, in that sense, the way that it sort of dissolves into general background music, I think it does a really fascinating thing by doing ultimately what Donna tends to try to do herself in trying to blend in with the people around her and just sort of finding a place to fit. And so the sort of constructive nature of that facade, and the way that the music reflects that. I think I've said the music reflects the personality like 7 times just now, so sorry if I got redundant, but I hope my idea was coming across here. Yes, maybe some thoughts. Thank you, friends. Cool. Did I miss anything about Donna? Add some things? Kelly, you want to add some things about Donna? I didn't mean to take the ball over.
No, you're
fine. Oh, there's a question.
Yeah.
Does Donna's theme recur with her father the same way that Rose's theme recurred with Mickey or with, does it seem like the inkling for grandfather, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Will doesn't have, basically we're classifying themes as what's listed on the soundtrack.
Right.
As Karen's theme. So Will might have some different motifs, just little, like, melodic little things that show up when he does. But Will doesn't like have a full, like, character theme, even though he is so integral to this whole story.
I wouldn't be surprised though to find it to function similar, like you were saying, to how Mickey's does, where he probably borrows from Donna. Surely there will be some similarities there, just from that sort of red line familiarity thing. To go, hey, you know this character. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he sort of adopted that theme from Donna when he sort of lost her and her connection with the doctor, as a result of sad things.
We're pretty sure that here.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, that is sort of this theme. Yeah. The thing is, it's sort of like goofy and bouncy, so it doesn't quite show up often in the specials when he's really integral to the story. Like, I think it's on when he hops on the bus with all the people, is when we hear that. Oh, you, yes, okay.
So I kind of have 2 questions. In the Christmas Invasion, did Donna's theme show up or no?
Yes, it did. It actually showed up immediately in the very first shot of her in the TARDIS. Well, the very first shot of her in the TARDIS after the credits, where she's like yelling at them to take her back to the church.
Yeah.
So yeah, it does show up immediately. And I think, same thing happens in Partners in Crime.
Yes.
Yeah, the very first shot walking up the street.
Yeah.
Do you think that's the same thing with what you guys were saying with Martha, how they've already established that relationship, and that's why it happened so early in June on the Moon?
In Partners in Crime, yes.
Yes.
Not so much the Christmas invasion. That's
Yeah.
sort of leading back to the whole facade she has.
Oh,
I'm trying to keep on.
More of a comment than a question, but more like adding on to like how she how the music kind of like blends in the background noise, the more it's played, and I think that adds more the more surprise she gets I don't describe what the episode and going to the season finale with how she's one of the most important people adding to that episode.
Right.
So it just kind of adds to her character and the more surprise you get.
Yeah, for those who didn't hear, she makes an excellent point here that that notion of her sort of blending into the past reinforces the intensity of the moment when she realizes that she's the most important person in the universe, and how that becomes quite a surprising shock for her. She's a powerful woman.
So I finished.
So I think that how with Martha's theme, it sort of reinforces that they've met before, and that's why it shows up so quickly. I think maybe with Donna, it shows up so quickly to reinforce the fact that she kind of, all of his other companions, he kind of chose. There was like a definite, you should come with me. With Donna, she kind of just fell on top of it and was like, this is happening. So I think the abruptness of her thing showing up might also reinforce the fact that she just sort of popped up in his life and immediately was just like, hey, I'm here and this is happening. And
Totally. No, I actually would love to kind of take that and run with it a little bit, because I just realized that relates to a point I forgot to say earlier. So thanks for that comment. I appreciate it. 14. This whole idea of Donna being a companion more via fate than the Doctor's choice, really, and how all of that is sort of coming to its conclusion with the meta-crisis situation. The way that she becomes a pivotal part, not only of his identity, but sort of this rebirth situation, and how they sort of become one. And so that idea we were talking about earlier about the notion of a facade and attempting to blend in a place where you feel like you necessarily don't. In that sense, Donna and the Doctor sort of parallel one another in those attempts. And so that sort of bubbly, peppy outside, covering up a lot of pain and sorrow and suffering from their past, is something that they share, and I think is reflected in both of those themes musically, but also narrative-wise, may very well be the means by which the meta-crisis was even possible.
Okay, as much as I would love to answer every of the questions here, we have to sort of move forward. We're carrying everything. Okay, yeah, sorry guys, but feel free to come talk to us afterwards. We will do our best to answer. So we're going to move on to Amy and Rory. Yeah. Finally, to hear me talk. Yeah. So we're gonna go ahead and play a little bit of one of Amy's themes. We're gonna start with Amelia, which is Little Amy. Sorry, I'm kind of sick, so excuse my voice. Amelia's theme appears in the first shot of her in her garden when she's little, when she meets the Doctor. And her theme is closely intertwined with the Doctor's theme. If you kind of listen to them, they're very similar because I read that wrong. It's the Doctor's secondary. Thank you! she was such a little girl. Just an interesting little tidbit here about Emily's theme. You know how Prisoner Zero sort of makes that rattling noise? You know, he's like, like I'm not going to do that again. Yeah. That is actually embedded in Little Amy's theme here, which sort of underlines that manipulation that Prisoner Zero has had over her whole life. You know, there's like an entire extra room in her house that he lives in. It's just doesn't exist. And he's sort of is manipulating her whole life. Like, she has no parents. You know, she lives with her aunt. That's just an interesting little tidbit. Yeah, so now we're going to move on to Amy's theme. So when she's all grown up, so we'll play a little bit of that for you. It's a development of Amelia's theme, which makes sense. She plays So this is her in The Beast Below when she's like floating outside the TARDIS and she's finally actually traveling with the Doctor and she's there with him. And did you hear like the similarities, and it's just a little bit more church sounding. Sound right? Okay. Because now that she is grown and now she is with the Doctor, but it's still similar to hers because she was still connected to the Doctor when she was a child. Sorry, my voice is and it's also heard again when she convinces the Doctor to save the star whale. Star whale by paralleling his situation to the whales. And the whale has taken the humans into its care and reminding the Doctor about himself. Yeah, that's the whole part where she's like, all this pain, all this loneliness, and all it is making time.
So it's a really important moment in that sort of companions sort of teaching the Doctor about humans, obviously, that ongoing pain for every companion, really. But I think it's a really important moment there where she points out all that pain and loneliness and the way that the whale converted it into kindness in taking care of humanity, and that's precisely what the Doctor himself has done, and sort of grounding him in that realization, you know, to be merciful in the understanding that we've got these grand space creatures that care so much about humanity, perhaps as a response or a reconciliation of their own internal pain and struggling.
So now we're going to kind of move into Rory and Amy and Rory's theme. So Rory also doesn't really have a theme, and he kind of borrows but shares Amy's theme, and it's when in Amy's choice, when he asks what stops the other's dream, and Amy and the Doctor crash the van and die because Amy doesn't want to live without Rory, and convinced it's a dream because Rory isn't there, and it can't be real, and she doesn't want to accept that. So that, because it's Amy's theme, that sort of signals now, because we've gone through this, is it Rory or is it the Doctor, which one does she really love, sort of thing. And so that's sort of a turning point where you realize it is Rory that she loves and she wants to be with, and that her theme plays there because she doesn't want to live without Rory is a big signal that Rory is really, really, really important to her. and that whole thing, Rory borrowing her theme, is echoed again in the Pandora Opens. So after Amy finds the wedding ring that Rory had in the doctor's jacket pocket, she was getting some screwdriver or something. As she confronts him about it in the tube with the Pandora, oh, I lost my place in the notes, sorry guys. So that's, like, since Rory's been erased from time, Amy's alone. You know, there's no Rory, like, there. She doesn't remember him. He's physically there, but she doesn't quite remember him. Which is why it's just Amy's theme and not both Amy and Rory. We haven't really transitioned to both of their themes yet.
So it's an interesting reflection of what happens to Rose's theme. We were talking about earlier how Rose's theme, when those variations come in, that kind of operates as a signal to the audience that, like, it feels familiar, but the variation is just enough to make it kind of unsettling. So a similar thing is happening here. While it's not necessarily a variation of Amy's theme, what we've got is Amy and Rory's theme as an option. They've got sort of a kind of their love couple theme, and then they've got the just Amy theme. And so in that sense, it's unsettling because through dramatic irony, so our awareness of Rory, despite her lack of awareness of Rory, makes Amy's theme in that case feel unsettling. If that makes sense. I don't know if I'm totally explaining that, but it's sort of like we're being brought into her reality by having just the Amy theme by itself. But our dramatic irony of the knowledge of Rory is going, wait a minute, this should be the Amy and Rory theme. What happened to Rory?
Okay, we want to talk about Rory. We should move on.
Okay.
Because we have
How are we doing for time?
like 7 minutes.
Oh man, we have 7 minutes. Oh no. Do you guys, well, here's a question. Do you guys want to dive into Clara, or do you want to do questions for 7 minutes? Clara. Okay. Clara. All right, let's talk about Clara.
All right, so I'm gonna play a little bit of Clara's theme here.
So Clara's theme is actually heard in The Asylum of Dolls when she first, we actually first see her character. So the doctor calls or contacts her from the doll ship. Is the first time you hear Clara's theme. And then her theme shows up again at the very, very end of the episode when she drops the force field for the Dr. Amy and Rory to escape. And that, going back to the companion themes connecting to humanity and everything, that's like a literal retention of her humanity since she's physically the Dalek. She's doing something good, something not in a Dalek's nature. She's saving other people. And then, again, we hear it when we meet our Clara in the Bells of St. John. So after the spoonheads come and try to uproot her, the doctor takes her upstairs and puts her to bed, beats out Jammy Dodgers, tries not to eat them.
Which the theme's appearance there is quite a significant signaling thing, like a tool for us, because of the way that Clara's character is showing up here and there at random, and there's a difficulty to pin down which one is the one. And so the appearance of the theme in that episode is the one that signals to us, this is the one that we're going to follow, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And it also shows up when the doctor finds her 101 Places to See book and the leaf of the most important leaves in human history. And then interestingly enough, the next episode is the Raised Octeten. And the only time you hear Clara's theme, unlike any other companions, where you usually hear it frequently throughout the second episode, is when the doctor travels back and sees how Clara's parents met. How she came to be. He's trying to sort her out. Is this the actual Clara? That's sort of another signal, like you were saying, that yes, this is Clara from before she popped into the time screens.
Also an interesting side note as well. We've talked about each companion and how their theme links to their family. And I think this is an interesting example of a continuation of that, where the theme comes up in relation to Clara's parents. But it's an interesting variation in this case, where the doctor is the one who goes to see her parents, as opposed to the companion attempting to rescue them or get back in contact. Okay.
Yes.
Let's talk about diegesis. Who remembers what diegesis is? Just kidding, I'm not quizzing you. So once again, just a quick recap. The diegesis is the world of the narrative, right? And non-diegesis is outside that world. So the scoring itself is non-diegetic, which is what makes Clara's theme really fascinating, because there's that one part, you guys remember that scene where, what's the episode title? Hellbent. In Hellbent, when they've recreated the diner, right? Because the doctor doesn't remember who Clara is. And he's sitting in the diner talking to Clara, not realizing that that's who it is. And he is like strumming away at his guitar. And she says, "What's that song?" And he says, "I think it's called Clara." And then he plays her theme. Not just like, here's a cute song about a girl maybe called Clara. No, this is the non-diegetic theme. He's playing the score within the diegesis. It's like a fascinating situation, right? I was really excited about it when it happened. We've only got 2 minutes. You guys are lucky, because now I only have 2 minutes to dive in as far as I can. How cool that is. But basically, oh my gosh, I'm going to try to summarize this really fast. But basically, consider the fact that that whole diner scene is a constructed reality for the benefit of the doctor, right? Because he's lost this portion of his memory and they're trying to get him back into reality. So that whole situation is foregrounding the constructedness of reality. And what does the non-diegetic score do to the film as a whole? It foregrounds its constructedness to us. Because it's a non-realistic thing, right? It's not something the characters are hearing. It's not like imagine if like a realism documentary suddenly had a dramatic score to it, right? It would bring forward that constructed nature. So where the non-diegetic scoring of a film elaborates on it or foregrounds to us the constructed nature of the film itself, now we've got the doctor in his constructed reality playing his own non-diegetic, but diegetic now, outside score. So foregrounding that constructiveness that he's already inside of. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry I couldn't like expand on that more cohesively, but that's the best I can do in 2 minutes.
Just our quick little end bit. The last time you hear Clara's theme is when Clara's theme materializes and the doctor sees his TARDIS with the portrait of Clara on the front, and that sort of reinforces the doctor's realization that the woman he was talking to in the diner was actually Clara. It wasn't just some random woman. We are out of time. There are 12 seconds left. Thank you. If you have any questions, feel free to come up and ask us. We'll sort of talk to you while we. Thank you.